The morning sun peeked through the blinds of the riverside diner, casting long strips of light across the worn linoleum floor. It was just after 11 a.m., that strange time between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd, when things slowed down just enough to refill ketchup bottles and wipe down menus. Jessica wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and adjusted her apron. Tuesday shifts were usually quiet, but today she was pulling a double because Tina had called in sick again. 6 years of waiting tables had taught her that extra shifts meant extra tips, and with rent due next week, she couldn't afford to say no. "Order up for table 7. Frank, the cook, called from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates loaded with scrambled eggs and hash browns onto the counter. Jessica grabbed the plates and made her way across the diner, weaving between tables with the practiced ease of someone who had walked this floor 1,000 times. The smell of coffee and bacon hung in the air, mixing with the faint scent of cleaning supplies from the morning mop-down. "Here you go, folks. Anything else I can get for you?" she asked, placing the plates in front of an older couple who'd been coming in every Tuesday for as long as she'd worked there. "Just some more coffee when you get a chance, sweetheart," the woman said, already reaching for the syrup. Jessica nodded and headed back to grab the coffee pot. The bell above the door jingled, and she glanced over automatically to see who was coming in. A man and a young boy stood in the doorway, the man's hand gripping the boy's shoulder so tightly that his knuckles were white. Something about the pair made her pause. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and a jacket that seemed too heavy for the mild spring weather. Nothing too unusual there. But the boy, Jessica guessed he was around 8 years old, had his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. His blue t-shirt was wrinkled and had a stain near the collar, and his sneakers were caked with mud. "Seat yourselves," called Hank, the manager, from behind the counter where he was tallying the morning receipts. The man led the boy to a booth near the back, choosing the one farthest from the windows. Jessica watched as he slid in across from the boy rather than next to him. Most parents with kids that age sat side by side, she'd noticed over the years. "I'll be right with you," she called, grabbing menus from the stack by the register. When she approached their table, the man was hunched over his phone. The boy sat perfectly still, hands in his lap, shoulders slightly curved inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. "Hi there, welcome to Riverside. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Jessica placed the menus on the table, making sure to smile at the boy. The man looked up quickly, his eyes darting around before settling on her face. "Coffee, black." He had a deep voice with a slight accent she couldn't place. Jessica turned to the boy. "And for you, buddy, we've got chocolate milk, orange juice, soda." Before the boy could answer, the man cut in. "He'll have water. Just water." The boy's eyes flicked up for just a second, then back down to his hands. "Coming right up," Jessica said, maintaining her smile even as she felt a strange tightness in her chest. As she walked away, she glanced back. The man was leaning across the table, saying something to the boy in a low voice, his finger jabbing the air between them. The boy nodded repeatedly, his small shoulders tense. At the drink station, Jessica filled a mug with coffee and grabbed a glass for water. Her coworker Darlene was loading clean silverware into bins. "That guy who just came in," Jessica whispered. "Something seem off to you?" Darlene peeked around the corner. "Beats me." "Why?" Jessica shrugged. "Just a feeling." "Your feelings got you mixed up with that guitar player last summer, remember? The one with the wife in Toledo?" Darlene laughed, nudging Jessica with her elbow. Yeah. Jessica rolled her eyes, but she couldn't shake the uneasiness. She returned to the table with their drinks. "Ready to order?" The man hadn't even opened his menu. "Cheeseburger, well done. Fries." He pushed the menu toward her without looking up. Jessica turned to the boy. "How about you, sweetie? We make great pancakes even in the afternoon." The boy looked at the man, who gave a curt nod. "Pancakes, please," the boy whispered, so quietly Jessica had to lean in to hear him. "You got it. Those come with bacon or sausage. No meat," the man interrupted. "Just pancakes." Jessica nodded, writing on her pad. "I'll put that right in for you." As she turned to leave, she noticed the boy's arms. 3 small bruises, finger-shaped, just visible below his t-shirt sleeve. Her stomach tightened. Kids got bruises all the time playing, falling off bikes, roughhousing. But something about those marks perfectly spaced like someone had grabbed him. At the kitchen, she clipped the order to the rotating wheel for Frank. Then she walked over to where Hank was counting change at the register. Hank. She kept her voice low. That kid in the back booth. Something doesn't feel right. Hank glanced over, then back to his counting. What do you mean? I don't know exactly. The man won't let him talk, and the kid looks scared, and he's got bruises on his arm. Hank sighed. Jessica, remember last month when you thought that woman was kidnapping a little girl, and it turned out to be her daughter having a tantrum about ice cream? Jessica felt her face flush. This is different. Just serve them their food, okay? We can't go around accusing every customer who has a kid with them of something bad. Jessica wanted to argue but knew it wouldn't do any good. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe the boy was just shy, and the man was just having a bad day. When their food was ready, she carried it to their table. The man was still on his phone, and the boy sat in the same position, barely having touched his water. Here we go, she said, setting down the plates. 1 cheeseburger well done, and pancakes for the young man. Can I get you anything else? Syrup? Butter? It's fine, the man said without looking up. Jessica noticed the boy eyeing the pancakes hungrily but not reaching for his fork. She placed the syrup bottle near him. These pancakes are pretty famous around here, she said gently. My nephew likes to make smiley faces with the syrup. For the first time, the boy's expression changed slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting just a bit. Then the man cleared his throat, and the boy's face fell back into blankness. We're fine, the man repeated, more firmly this time. Jessica nodded and stepped away, but instead of moving to another table, she went to the coffee station where she could keep an eye on them. The man bit into his burger, chewing mechanically while scrolling on his phone. The boy carefully poured a thin stream of syrup onto his pancakes and began eating small bites, his movements cautious and quiet. Something was definitely wrong. Jessica had served countless families over the years, happy ones, tired ones, families clearly in the middle of arguments. This was different. The tension between them wasn't the normal kind between a parent and child. And why was the boy so careful? Most kids his age would be wiggling in their seats talking, making a mess with the syrup. This child moved like he was afraid any noise might bring trouble. During her break, Jessica sat at the counter, pretending to check her phone while watching them. The diner had emptied out, with only the pair and an elderly man reading a newspaper remaining. The boy had finished his pancakes and sat with his hands in his lap again. The man was on his 3rd cup of coffee, constantly checking his watch and the door. Like what you see? Frank's voice made her jump. He'd come out from the kitchen and was leaning against the counter beside her. That guy? Jessica kept her voice low. Does he look nervous to you? Frank squinted in their direction. Looks like a dad having lunch with his kid to me. They don't look alike at all, and the boy seems afraid of him. Frank shrugged. Not all families look alike, Jess. And some parents are just strict. Doesn't make them criminals. Maybe they were right. Hank, Darlene, Frank. Maybe she was seeing problems where there weren't any. She'd always been told she had an overactive imagination, even as a kid. But as she watched the man roughly wipe the boy's face with a napkin, making him flinch, that feeling in her gut only grew stronger. The bell over the door jingled again as a group of 4 construction workers came in, laughing loudly. Jessica sighed and grabbed menus. Whatever was going on with the man and boy would have to wait. She had other customers to serve, and Hank would have a fit if she ignored them to play detective. But as she seated the construction workers, she made a mental note of the boy's face, his mud-caked sneakers and those small finger-shaped bruises, just in case. Because sometimes a feeling was more than just a feeling. Sometimes it was a warning. Jessica balanced 4 plates along her arm as she delivered lunch to the construction workers. They were loud but friendly, joking about a mishap at their work site involving a cement mixer and someone's new boots. Their easy laughter filled the diner, a stark contrast to the heavy silence hanging over the booth in the back corner. Can I get you boys anything else? she asked, refilling their water glasses. "We're good for now, hun," said the oldest of the group, a gray-haired man with leathery skin from years of outdoor work. As Jessica turned away, she used the moment to glance back at the man and boy. The man was on his phone again, his burger half-eaten and pushed aside. The boy had finished his pancakes and was staring at his empty plate, not moving, not looking around like most kids would. Most children his age couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes, but this one hadn't budged for nearly half an hour. Behind the counter, Jessica grabbed a coffee pot and headed toward their table. She didn't need to. The man's cup was still half full, but something pushed her to check on them again. "Coffee refill?" she asked, holding up the pot. The man glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "Fine," he muttered, pushing his cup toward her. As Jessica poured, she deliberately addressed the boy. "How are those pancakes? Did you save room for ice cream? We make a pretty awesome sundae." The boy's eyes flickered up to her face, then quickly over to the man as if seeking permission to speak. The man cleared his throat. "We don't need dessert, are you sure?" Jessica pressed, smiling warmly at the boy. "Tuesday is hot fudge day. The kitchen makes it from scratch." Something changed in the boy's expression, a tiny spark of interest, maybe even hope. For just a moment, he looked like a normal kid who wanted ice cream, not the frightened shell who'd walked in earlier. The man's jaw tightened. "I said no." Jessica nodded, but she wasn't giving up. "Well, the offer stands if you change your mind." She placed a paper kids menu and a small pack of crayons on the table in front of the boy. "We've got a cool maze on the back. My nephew says it's pretty hard to solve." Before the man could object, she turned and walked away, heart pounding. She hadn't planned that move, but seeing the boy's reaction to something as simple as ice cream had strengthened her suspicion. What kid doesn't light up at the mention of dessert? And what adult refuses so firmly, unless they're deliberately denying something a child would enjoy? From behind the counter, Jessica watched as the man pushed the menu and crayons away from the boy, saying something in a low voice that made the child's shoulders slump further. The construction workers called for their check, and Jessica forced herself to focus on her job. As she processed their payment, the elderly newspaper reader at the counter also stood to leave, leaving just the man and boy in the restaurant. The midday lull had begun, that quiet period between lunch and dinner when the diner usually emptied out. "I'm taking my break now," Darlene announced, untying her apron. "Frank's going out for a smoke too." "You good by yourself for 15?" Jessica nodded, though her mouth felt dry. "Yeah, I've only got the one table anyway." As Darlene and Frank headed out the back door, Hank looked up from his paperwork. "I've got to run to the bank before the lunch deposit deadline. You'll be okay for 20 minutes? "Sure," Jessica said, trying to sound casual while her mind raced. She would be alone in the restaurant with them. Once Hank left, Jessica busied herself wiping down tables, slowly working her way closer to the booth where the man and boy sat in silence. The man was growing increasingly agitated, checking his watch every few minutes and looking out the window at the parking lot. The boy hadn't moved, his hands still in his lap, eyes downcast. When she was at the table next to theirs, Jessica knocked a salt shaker onto the floor deliberately. As she bent to pick it up, she heard the man hiss at the boy. "Stop looking around, eyes down." "Remember what I told you?" The boy whispered something too quiet for her to catch. "I don't care," the man replied. "One more day. Then it's done." Jessica's blood ran cold. One more day until what was done? She straightened up, salt shaker in hand, and approached their table directly. "Can I get you folks anything else? More water? The check?" The man looked at her sharply. "The check now." Jessica nodded and went to the register to print their bill. Her hands were shaking slightly as she placed it in the black folder and walked back to their table. She needed to do something, but what? She had no proof of anything wrong, just a feeling and a few suspicious comments. As she set the check on the table, she accidentally on purpose knocked over the boy's water glass, spilling it across the table. "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing napkins from the dispenser. The water flowed toward the man, who jumped up to avoid getting wet. "Clumsy idiot," he growled, brushing at his pants. "Let me clean that up," Jessica said, quickly placing a stack of napkins in front of the boy as she mopped up the spill. She glanced at him meaningfully, hoping he would understand her intention. The boy's eyes widened slightly. Did he get it? She couldn't be sure. "Just hurry up," the man snapped, pulling out his wallet and throwing some bills on the dry part of the table. Jessica continued wiping the table, her heart racing. "I'll get you some fresh napkins," she said, gathering the wet ones and walking quickly to the trash can. When she returned with dry napkins, she noticed the boy had his hand curled around one of the napkins she'd left, holding it in his lap now. The man was counting out exact change, focused on the money. "Again, I'm really sorry about that," Jessica said, placing fresh napkins on the table. "Take your time." "No rush," the man grunted and finished counting coins. "Let's go," he said to the boy, standing up. The boy slid out of the booth, and as he did, Jessica saw him slip the napkin into his pocket. Her heart leapt. Had he written something? Or was he just taking a napkin? "Thanks for coming in," she called as they headed for the door. "Hope to see you again soon." The man didn't acknowledge her, his hand once again gripping the boy's shoulder as they left. The bell jingled as the door closed behind them. Jessica rushed to the window, watching as they walked across the parking lot to a dark blue sedan with out-of-state plates. She quickly grabbed her phone from her apron pocket and snapped a picture of the car and license plate, just as they pulled out of the lot. Taking a deep breath, she looked around the now empty diner. She hurried to their table to clear it, hoping to find some clue, some confirmation of her suspicions. As she gathered the plates, she noticed a small piece of napkin left behind, torn from a corner. On it were tiny letters pressed hard into the paper as if written in a hurry with a crayon. "Help," just one word, but it made Jessica's knees go weak. She hadn't imagined it. Something was very wrong, and the boy knew it too. She grabbed the scrap of paper and ran to the phone behind the counter, her fingers trembling as she dialed. What would she say? Who should she call? The police might think she was overreacting without more proof, and what if they didn't take her seriously? What if the man and boy left town before anyone could check on them? The construction workers' loud conversation from earlier suddenly came back to her. They had mentioned staying at the Mountain View Motel on the edge of town. It was the only decent place to stay for miles around unless you drove all the way to the highway. If the man and boy weren't from here, chances were they might be staying there too. Jessica put down the phone. She needed more information before calling the police. They might dismiss a waitress's hunch based on a water-stained napkin with one word on it. She needed to be smart about this. When Darlene returned from her break, Jessica grabbed her purse from the back room. "I need to run a quick errand," she told Darlene. "Cover for me for 30 minutes? Darlene raised an eyebrow. "You never take breaks." "What's so important?" "I just need to check something," Jessica said vaguely. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." Before Darlene could ask more questions, Jessica was out the door and in her car, a beat-up Honda that had seen better days. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove toward the Mountain View Motel, her mind racing faster than her car. What was she doing? This wasn't like her. She wasn't a detective or a social worker. She was just a waitress with an overactive imagination, according to everyone who knew her. But that scrap of napkin wasn't imagination. And the boy's fearful eyes weren't imagination either. As the motel came into view, a long, single-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign, Jessica felt her resolve strengthen. She might be just a waitress, but right now, she might also be the only person paying attention to a child who needed help. She pulled into the parking lot, scanning for the dark blue sedan. If she could confirm they were staying here, she'd have something more concrete to tell the police. And if not, well, at least she'd have tried. In the far corner of the lot, partially hidden by a large pickup truck, she spotted it. The same car, with the same license plate she'd photographed. The boy's single-word plea echoed in her mind. "Help." Jessica parked her car and took a deep breath. Now what? Jessica sat in her car, engine off, staring at the blue sedan parked at the far end of the Mountain View Motel lot. A warm breeze blew through her open window, carrying the smell of sun-baked asphalt and nearby pine trees. The motel was quiet at this hour, with only a few cars scattered across the parking lot. "What now, genius?" she muttered to herself. She hadn't thought this far ahead. What was she supposed to do? Knock on doors until she found them? Call out for a boy whose name she didn't even know? The motel office door opened, and an older woman with frizzy gray hair stepped out, watering can in hand. She moved slowly along the walkway, tending to the sad-looking potted plants outside each room. Jessica watched her, an idea forming. Jessica felt lightheaded watching the scene unfold. The boy was talking to Officer Chen now, his small hands gesturing as words poured out. The officer put a gentle hand on his shoulder, then spoke into her radio again. More police cars arrived, their lights washing the faded motel in alternating red and blue. An ambulance pulled in behind them, though Jessica couldn't see any obvious injuries from where she stood. "They'll want to talk to you," Betty said, nudging Jessica. "Come on." As they stepped out of the office, Jessica saw Officer Chen leading the boy toward the ambulance, her hand still resting protectively on his shoulder. The man was in the back of a police cruiser, his face a mask of fury as Officer Reynolds spoke with another officer beside the car. When Officer Chen spotted Jessica, she said something to a female paramedic, who took over with the boy, and then walked over. "Ms. Martinez," Officer Chen said, using the name Jessica had given when she called. "I need to thank you. If you hadn't called this in." "Was I right?" Jessica asked, her mouth dry. "Was he in danger?" Officer Chen's expression was grim. "Very much so. That boy was reported missing from his home in Kentucky 4 days ago. Custody dispute gone very wrong. His mother has been frantic." Jessica felt her knees go weak. "He was kidnapped?" "By his non-custodial father, who lost all rights after a history of abuse. He was planning to take the boy across the border tomorrow." Officer Chen shook her head. "The boy says his father told him no one would believe him if he tried to get help, that he'd hurt his mother if he said anything." Jessica looked over at the ambulance where the boy sat wrapped in a blanket despite the warm day. "Is he hurt?" "Some bruising, dehydration. He'll be okay physically, the rest will take time." Officer Chen squeezed Jessica's arm. "But he will recover, because of you." Jessica hadn't realized she was crying until she felt tears on her cheeks. "I wasn't even sure. Everyone thought I was overreacting." "Trust your instincts," Officer Chen said firmly. "They were spot on today." As Jessica watched, another police car pulled up, and a woman leapt out before it had fully stopped. Her face was tear-streaked but hopeful as an officer led her toward the ambulance. When the boy saw her, he jumped down and ran to her, throwing himself into her arms. The sound of their reunion, half sobbing, half laughing, carried across the parking lot. The woman rocked her son back and forth, kissing the top of his head, over and over, as if to convince herself he was really there. Betty handed Jessica a tissue. "Not bad for a waitress on her lunch break," she said gruffly, though her own eyes were suspiciously damp. Jessica nodded, unable to speak as she watched mother and son cling to each other, both safe, both found. Sometimes, she thought, a spilled glass of water could change everything. The next morning, Jessica woke to her alarm at 5:30 a.m., the same as any other day. But as she stared at the ceiling of her small apartment, yesterday's events came rushing back. The boy, the napkin, the motel, the police. She reached for her phone and scrolled through the local news app. There it was, halfway down the page. "Missing child recovered in Pine Grove, suspect in custody." The article was brief, mentioning only that a child reported missing from Kentucky had been found safe in their small town, thanks to an alert local citizen. No names were given to protect the boy's privacy. Jessica set down her phone and got ready for work, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. But today felt different. Her mind kept replaying the image of the boy running into his mother's arms, their tearful reunion in the motel parking lot. When she arrived at the Riverside Diner, Hank was already unlocking the front door. He looked up as she approached. "Morning," he said, holding the door open for her. "Heard you had some excitement yesterday." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast. Small town," Hank shrugged. "Betty from the motel called her sister, who's married to my cousin. Said you saved some kid who was kidnapped." Jessica felt her face flush. "I just noticed something wasn't right, that's all." Hank studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Well, good job. Guess your feelings aren't so crazy after all." Coming from Hank, that was practically a parade in her honor. Jessica smiled and tied on her apron as they entered the diner. The morning rush came and went, a blur of coffee refills and breakfast specials. Word had apparently gotten around because several regulars mentioned the rescue as Jessica served them. By lunchtime, she was tired of the attention and the repeated tellings of the story. You're famous, Darlene teased as they restocked sugar packets together. Local hero and everything. Jessica rolled her eyes. Hardly. I'm just glad the boy is okay. Still, Darlene said, more serious now. It was brave, what you did. Going to the motel, calling the police. Most people wouldn't have bothered. You would have, Jessica said. Darlene shook her head. I'm not so sure. I was the one telling you to mind your business, remember? Before Jessica could respond, the bell over the door jingled. 2 women walked in. Officer Chen from yesterday, now in plain clothes, and beside her a slender woman with dark blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Jessica recognized her immediately as the boy's mother, though she looked more composed today than during yesterday's emotional reunion. Officer Chen spotted Jessica and led the woman toward the counter. Ms. Martinez, she said with a warm smile. I thought we might find you here. Jessica wiped her hands on her apron. Officer Chen. Hi. It's Lisa, please. I'm off duty. She gestured to the woman beside her. This is Diane. She wanted to meet you. Diane stepped forward, her eyes bright with barely contained emotion. You saved my son, she said simply. Jessica felt her throat tighten. I just noticed something was wrong. Anyone would have... No, Diane interrupted gently. Not anyone. His father had him for 4 days. They stayed at motels, ate at restaurants, went to gas stations. Hundreds of people must have seen them. You were the only one who paid attention. Jessica didn't know what to say to that. We were wondering if you could take a break, Lisa said. Diane would like to talk to you if that's okay. Jessica looked at Hank, who was pretending not to eavesdrop from the grill. He nodded. Take 30, he said. It's slow anyway. Jessica led them to a booth in the back corner, away from the few lunch customers. A waitress taking a break in her own restaurant felt strange, but she slid into the seat across from Diane and Lisa. How is he? Jessica asked once they were settled. Your son? Diane's smile was tired but genuine. He's doing better than I expected. He's with my sister right now. We're staying at a hotel in town until we can go back home. She twisted a paper napkin in her hands. The police said he wrote help on a napkin here, and that's how you knew. Jessica nodded. I spilled some water on purpose. Gave him crayons and napkins. I wasn't sure if he'd understand what I was trying to do. He's smart, Diane said proudly. Always has been. She took a deep breath. His father lost custody 2 years ago. Drinking problem, anger issues. Court gave him supervised visits only, but 3 months ago, the supervision requirement was lifted for good behavior. Her voice hardened. That was a mistake. Lisa rested a hand on Diane's arm. You don't have to go into all this. I want to, Diane said firmly. She looked back at Jessica. 2 weeks ago, he filed for full custody again. The hearing was scheduled for next month. I guess he decided to take matters into his own hands instead. She closed her eyes briefly. He picked Tommy up from school, told the teacher there was a family emergency. By the time I got home and realized what had happened, they were already across state lines. Jessica thought about the small boy in the diner sitting so still, so afraid. I'm so sorry. The police told me they were headed for Mexico, Diane continued. He had fake IDs made for both of them, if they'd crossed the border. She didn't finish the sentence. Jessica's stomach knotted at the thought of what might have happened if she hadn't noticed the boy's behavior, if she hadn't trusted her instincts. Anyway, Diane said, straightening her shoulders, I wanted to thank you in person. The police said you're the reason Tommy is safe now. Her voice cracked slightly. I can never repay you for that. You don't have to, Jessica said, meaning it. I'm just glad I could help. Lisa, who had been quiet, leaned forward. Not many people would have done what you did, Jessica. Most would have dismissed their concerns or been too worried about being wrong to act. I almost did, Jessica admitted. Everyone at work thought I was overreacting. That's usually how it goes, Lisa said with a nod. In my 10 years on the force, I've seen it too many times. People notice something off but talk themselves out of reporting it. I've been thinking about that, Jessica said slowly, about how easy it would have been to ignore what I saw. Diane reached across the table and squeezed Jessica's hand. But you didn't. And because of that, Tommy is safe. They talked a while. Longer. Diane sharing pictures of Tommy from her phone, Tommy with a dog, Tommy at a baseball game, Tommy grinning with a missing front tooth. Jessica was struck by how different he looked in the photos. Animated, happy, a normal 8-year-old boy. So unlike the frightened, silent child she'd served pancakes to. As they were preparing to leave, Diane pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "This is for you." Jessica shook her head. "I can't accept any reward." "It's not from me," Diane said with a small smile. "It's from Tommy. He insisted." Curious, Jessica opened the envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing of a stick figure in an apron standing next to a smaller stick figure. Both had huge smiles. At the bottom, in careful block letters, was written, "Thank you for the pancakes and for saving me." Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. "Tell him I said he's very welcome. For both." After they left, Jessica returned to work, tucking the drawing carefully into her purse. The afternoon passed in a haze of routine tasks, but her mind kept drifting to Tommy and Diane, heading home to Kentucky to rebuild their life together. That evening, as she was finishing her shift, Hank called her into his office. Jessica braced herself, wondering if she was in trouble for taking such a long break earlier. Hank was sitting behind his desk, looking uncomfortable, as he always did when dealing with anything personal. "Got a call today," he said without preamble. "From the mayor's office." Jessica blinked in surprise. "The mayor? What did I do? Seems they want to give you some kind of citizen award at the next town council meeting. For your brave actions and quick thinking that saved a young life. Their words, not mine." He looked at her expectantly. Jessica shook her head. "That's not necessary. I was just doing the right thing." "Yeah, well, the mayor disagrees. They're making a whole thing of it. Press release, ceremony, the works." He shuffled some papers on his desk. "And, I might have told them it would be fine with you, Hank." Jessica protested. "You know I hate that kind of attention." He held up a hand. "Hear me out. The mayor also mentioned some college scholarship program they're setting up. For people who want to work in child welfare or protection services. They're naming it after you." That stopped Jessica short. "After me, why?" Hank shrugged. "Because of what you did, I guess. One person making a difference and all that." He looked at her with unusual directness. "You're always talking about going back to school someday. Maybe this is your someday." Jessica sat back, stunned. She had talked about going back to school. Dreams shared over late-night closing shifts when the diner was empty and the conversation turned personal. Criminal justice, social work, psychology. Subjects she'd been interested in but never had the money or time to pursue. "I don't know, Hank," she said slowly. "I'm just a waitress who noticed something wrong." "Maybe that's exactly what they need," he replied. "People who notice." Later that night, Jessica sat on her small balcony watching the stars come out over the town. Her phone buzzed with yet another local news notification. Local waitress to receive Citizen Hero Award. She ignored it, still uncomfortable with the attention. Instead, she pulled out Tommy's drawing again. The stick figures smiled up at her, a simple thank you from a child who had his life back. Jessica thought about the scholarship, about Hank's suggestion, about all the other Tommies out there who might need someone to notice them. She had been lucky. Right place, right time, right instinct. But what if more people were trained to spot the signs? What if more people knew how to respond? What if she could teach others what to look for? Jessica folded the drawing carefully and went inside to her laptop. She opened a browser and typed, "Criminal Justice Degree Programs." Maybe this was her someday after all. 2 years later, Jessica adjusted her graduation cap in the mirror and took a deep breath. The black gown felt strange after years of wearing a waitress uniform, but she liked how it looked, liked what it represented. "You're going to be late for your own graduation," her mother called from the living room of Jessica's apartment. "And I'm not driving all the way from Florida to miss seeing you walk across that stage." Jessica smiled. Coming, Mom. She grabbed her phone from the dresser, noticing several text messages from her classmates and one from Hank. Riverside Diner crew holding your table for dinner after. No excuses. Even after leaving the diner to focus on school full-time last year, her old work family had remained supportive, checking in on her studies and celebrating her accomplishments. The drive to the community college was filled with her mother's cheerful chatter about relatives and neighbors back home. But Jessica's mind was elsewhere. 2 years of hard work, classes in psychology, criminal justice, and child development had led to this day. Her associate degree in child protection services was just the beginning. She'd already been accepted to the state university to complete her bachelor's degree in the fall. The graduation ceremony passed in a blur of speeches, applause, and the rhythmic calling of names, when the dean announced Jessica Martinez, Associate of Applied Science in Child Protection Services. With highest honors, her mother's whoop of delight could be heard above the polite applause. After the ceremony, as family and friends mingled on the lawn outside the auditorium, Jessica felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Officer Chen, Lisa, smiling at her. Congratulations, graduate, Lisa said, giving Jessica a quick hug. You came, Jessica exclaimed, surprised and touched. Though they had kept in touch over the past 2 years, Lisa's job kept her busy, and Jessica hadn't expected her to make time for the graduation. Wouldn't miss it, Lisa replied. Besides, I'm not just here as your friend. She nodded toward the parking lot where a woman and a young boy were walking toward them. Someone else wanted to congratulate you too. Jessica's breath caught as she recognized Diane and Tommy, now 10 years old and much taller than the last time she'd seen him. His face had lost some of its childish roundness, but his eyes were the same, thoughtful and intelligent, though now bright with excitement rather than shadowed by fear. Surprise, Tommy called out as they approached, waving enthusiastically. Jessica laughed and waved back, then turned to Lisa with a questioning look. They moved to the city last year, Lisa explained. Diane got a job at the hospital there. They've been doing well. Diane hugged Jessica warmly when they reached her. We wouldn't have missed this for anything, she said. Not after everything you've done. I haven't done that much, Jessica protested. Tommy, less shy now, rolled his eyes dramatically. You only saved my life and then started a whole program to help other kids. No big deal. Jessica laughed at his sarcasm, a healthy sign of a normal 10-year-old boy. The program was the mayor's idea, not mine. But you're the one who made it work, Diane pointed out. The Child Safety Awareness Program has already trained hundreds of people in the area. It was true. What had started as a simple citizen award had evolved into something much more meaningful. After the ceremony at Town Hall 2 years ago, Jessica had suggested that instead of just giving her an award, the town could use the attention to do something more impactful. With the mayor's support and Jessica's growing knowledge from her studies, they had developed a training program for service workers, waitstaff, hotel employees, bus drivers, and others who might encounter children in danger. The program taught them what signs to look for and how to respond appropriately. In the past year alone, 3 children in similar situations had been identified and helped by people who had taken the training. It wasn't a grand solution to the problem of child endangerment, but it was something concrete, something that made a difference. We brought you something, Tommy said, holding out a small wrapped package. Jessica took it, touched by the gesture. You didn't have to get me anything. Open it, Tommy urged, bouncing slightly on his toes. Jessica unwrapped the gift to find a framed photograph. It showed Tommy in a baseball uniform, grinning broadly with a trophy in his hands. I made the all-star team, he explained proudly. And Mom said you should have a picture of me doing something awesome instead of just that old crayon drawing. I love that crayon drawing, Jessica said honestly. It's still on my fridge, but this is pretty great too. She studied the photo, taking in his confident smile and the visible happiness in his eyes. This was a child who was safe, who was loved, who was thriving. Thank you. There's something else in there, Diane prompted. Jessica looked more closely at the frame and noticed a small envelope taped to the back. She carefully removed it and opened it to find a gift card. It's for the bookstore at the university, Diane explained. For your textbooks next semester. It's not much, but it's perfect, Jessica interrupted, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you both. Tommy looked up at his mother. Can I go see the fountain? He asked, pointing to the large water feature in the center of the campus. Stay where I can see you, Diane agreed. And Tommy ran off, full of the energy that had been suppressed when Jessica first met him. He's doing so well, Jessica observed. Watching him, Diane nodded. He has nightmares sometimes and he still goes to therapy once a month, but mostly he's just a normal kid now. Playing baseball, doing good in school, driving me crazy with his video games. Her voice grew serious. Not all stories end this well, though. I volunteer at a support group for parents of missing children now. Some of those families have been waiting for years with no answers. That's why the awareness program matters, Lisa said. The more eyes we have looking out for these kids, the better chance they have. Jessica's mother joined them then, and introductions were made all around. As they chatted, Jessica's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Professor Wilson, her academic advisor. Dean wants to meet with you Monday about the internship. Looking good. Jessica smiled. The internship with the County Child Protective Services Department was competitive, but her grades and the success of the awareness program had given her application an edge. If she got it, she'd be working directly with at-risk children and families while finishing her bachelor's degree. Good news? Lisa asked, noticing her smile. Possibly, Jessica replied. I'll know more on Monday. Tommy ran back to them, breathless from racing around the fountain. Mom, can Jessica come to my baseball game next Saturday? It's the championships. Diane looked at Jessica. We'd love to have you there if you're free. I wouldn't miss it, Jessica promised. As they walked toward the parking lot together, Jessica's former diner manager, Hank, approached, along with Darlene and several other former co-workers, all dressed up for the occasion. There's our college graduate, Hank called out. Tables ready at Riverside whenever you all are. We've got a cake and everything, Darlene added with a wink. Jessica made introductions again, smiling as her past and present came together in this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a waitress taking breakfast orders, noticing a scared little boy and acting on a hunch. Now she was heading toward a career dedicated to protecting children like Tommy, armed with knowledge, training, and purpose. Later that evening, after dinner at the diner where it had all begun, Jessica stood in the parking lot saying goodbyes to her friends and family. Tommy hugged her tightly before climbing into Diane's car. I'm going to be a baseball player when I grow up, he told her seriously. But if that doesn't work out, maybe I'll do what you do instead. Help kids and stuff, Jessica smiled. You'd be great at that. As their car pulled away, Lisa lingered behind. How does it feel? She asked. Graduation day. New beginnings. Jessica looked around at the familiar diner, the place where she'd spent so many years of her life. It looked smaller now somehow, though no less important. It feels right, she answered honestly, like I'm where I'm supposed to be. You know, Lisa said thoughtfully, in my job I see a lot of bad stuff, a lot of cases where no one stepped in, where no one noticed until it was too late. It's easy to get discouraged. She turned to face Jessica directly, but then there are days like today, when I get to see what happens when one person pays attention and takes action. When I see the ripple effects, Tommy's future, the awareness program, your career. It's a good reminder of why we do this work. Jessica nodded, understanding completely. One person can't fix everything, she said. But maybe we can fix the piece right in front of us. Exactly, Lisa agreed. And sometimes that's enough to change everything for someone. As Jessica drove home that evening, the graduation cap sitting on her passenger seat, she thought about the unlikely chain of events that had led her here. A spilled glass of water, a crayon message, a moment of decision when she chose to act instead of look away. She thought about Tommy, safe with his mother, playing baseball and dreaming of his future. She thought about the other children who had been helped because of the awareness program, and those who might be helped in the years to come through her work. There would always be more children in danger, more difficult situations, more complex problems than one person could solve. The world could feel overwhelming when you looked at all the darkness in it. But Jessica had learned an important lesson. You didn't have to save the whole world. Sometimes saving one child was enough. Sometimes a simple act of paying attention could change everything. Tomorrow she would start preparing for her internship interview. She would keep studying, keep learning, keep working toward her goals. But tonight she allowed herself to celebrate how far she had come from that Tuesday afternoon 2 years ago. when she had been just a waitress who noticed something wrong and decided to do something about it. Sometimes that was all it took to change a life. Sometimes that was everything.